Aloha, and welcome back to Season 3 of the Aravinda Show, hosted by me, Andrew Crusoe. For today's episode, I got to have a remarkable conversation with John Roderick, a musician, podcaster, and so much more. I've been following John's band, The Long Winters, as well as his podcasts for almost a decade now. He's also tied for first place as my favorite podcaster, so it was an honor to have the chance to interview him. Our conversation goes to some unexpected places. Enjoy.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Andrew.
Hi, John. What's in the show is in the show, right?
That's right. Just leave it in. It starts when it starts.
Starts when it starts. I learned that from you. Thanks for being on my show, John. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, tell me about your show. Tell me a little bit about what your show is about.
Well, that's a very good question. The show is called Aravinda Show. I might rename it. Aravinda is the Sanskrit word for lotus, and it's a metaphor. So the lotus, when it's growing, it pushes its way through the mud, and it gets up to the surface of the lake or the pond or whatever and blooms. And I think that's a metaphor for life. So it's a show about growth and personal evolution and change and doing work that's meaningful to us. And it's also an excuse to talk to people whose work I really admire, to be honest.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, I feel like I'm definitely always trying to push up through the mud, so I like it.
Yeah. So for people who don't know, this is kind of a different kind of intro that I usually done, but John Roderick is a musician and a podcaster and so many things. Everybody should check out The Long Winters. He was in Harvey Danger for a little while, and he's way up there in Seattle. And you spent most of your life in your childhood in Alaska, and then came down to Seattle. How old were you when you came down to Seattle? I try to put the timeline together, but sometimes I get it mixed up. And you were in Colorado for a hot second.
Just for a little bit, yeah. Although I've probably spent more time in Hawaii than Colorado over the years. But yeah, I mean, I was born in Seattle, and then because my parents got divorced when I was about 3, I split my time. My dad stayed in Alaska, my mom stayed in Seattle, so I went back and forth for a lot of my childhood. And then starting the summer after 4th grade, everyone moved back to Alaska. And then after I left Alaska, when I graduated from high school, I bounced around for a while, but settled in Seattle again as a grown-up person toward the end of 1990. So I was 21 years old, and I've lived in Seattle for the most part ever since.
Wow.
So yeah, over the course of my life, a lot more time in Seattle than in Anchorage, but formative years in Alaska.
Yeah, you speak about them a lot in the show. For people who don't know, everybody should go check out, really, and don't it's between you and me, Roderick on the Line is my favorite podcast in the world. That show has just deepened, and I don't even know how to describe it. To me, it's two guys. It's you and Merlin Mann, whom I've got to meet Merlin in person a few times. He's amazing, and I'm hoping to meet you in person at some point. But you guys both share stories of your life, but I think it's really a show about, I don't know if it sounds strange for me to say, I think it's a show about philosophy. It's kind of disguised as a funny show, but you guys talk about some pretty deep stuff on there pretty often.
How is it possible that you have met Merlin Mann, the notoriously an impossible person to meet? But you haven't met me, a relatively easy person to meet.
I know. It's crazy. It's life. I basically let it flow together. I was living for a hot minute. I was living in near Sacramento, I was born in East Bay. I was born in California. Oh God, that's a long story. But basically, he was doing the 3-ring binder with Scott Simpson, who I'd love to have on the show.
Right.
Scott's hilarious. And I went and I saw 3-ring binder, and they were hilarious. That was actually the second time I met Merlin. Merlin actually came to. So I really identified with you jumping back and forth between Alaska, because I basically did that with California. I bounced back and forth between California and Wisconsin. Most of my formative years were in Wisconsin.
Why?
Why?
Why Wisconsin? Yeah.
I don't know. Ask my father. He bounced back and forth. I know I have good parents, but I felt like I was kind of nomadic for a while. So Merlin did a talk for the Distinguished Lecture Series in Madison, Wisconsin, which is a good school. And that was the first time I met him. That was 1,000 years ago in 2010. And he hung out at this place called the Rathskeller, I think it's called. It's kind of like pub thing in UW. And we were just drinking beers. There was like 6 of us. And I was like, oh, and that was back when 43 folders kind of existed. And he updated it, which 43folders.com is Merlin's very interesting productivity site, good website. But I was like, I already kind of knew Merlin. I felt like, when you listen to somebody's podcast, you feel like you know a percentage of the way their mind works, at least. And it was such a delight. Yeah. So then I met him one more time in 2015. He did a meetup at Two Cats Comics, which sadly no longer exists. And I got a photo with him, and he was very, very nice. Yeah. But I was going to meet, I don't know if you remember, you get 1,000 tweets a day, I'm sure, but we were going to have lunch at one point, like a couple years ago, and then I had to change my flight. Oh, I changed my flight because the lava was flowing here, and I had to go through SFO instead of SeaTac.
Oh, right. You live on the Big Island.
Yes, sir.
Where the lava flows.
Was flowing.
Right. So you're an OG Merlin Mann fan. You go way back with him. So
I'm gonna. How far back do I have to go to be an OG fan with you? Probably 80s.
No, but I think people that claim to be OG fans of me have to go back to 2001,
right?
Because they're going to be talking about the music.
Definitely.
And 2001 is before the internet really existed. So
no, it was Napster. I screwed up. I was on Napster. Did you probably use Napster too? I'm guessing. I
did not. Not my thing.
You missed it. Oh, yeah. There was.
Yeah. Well, I'm not like a super consumer of music, so Napster just seemed like it was designed for somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, I had a record label and I was writing a column at the time, so if I wanted a record, they would just send it to me. I didn't have to steal it.
That's a really good point. That's a really, really good point. I'm gonna do full disclosure. I'm looking up when I added some Long Winters music to my library, and it looks like not too long ago. It's a while ago, 2012.
Oh, that's great. That's early on in the Roderick on the Line canon, right? 2012.
Yeah, exactly. And I was listening to that since episode 1. And once again, Roderick on the Line will be in the show notes. Absolute favorite. No, I look forward to that every Monday, and you just recorded that like an hour ago?
Yep, we did. We just got off the phone, and I'm doing some internet-based work today, because since we're coronavirus or COVID-19 sequestered, a lot of fellow musicians have been doing online concerts, playing from their basements.
Yeah.
I've kind of resisted it thus far, but I was asked by Adam Savage if I would do a song for a thing that the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum is doing this Thursday.
Really?
And it's some kind of live on YouTube concert featuring half a dozen or a dozen artists. And so I recorded a thing yesterday for it, but my sister got involved.
Susan
videotaped it. Yeah. And so now Susan is doing an edit of it. And so I'm like herding cats here, acting as an intermediary between my sister and the Smithsonian Institution. And let me tell you, if you're going to be caught between a rock and a hard place, that's it.
Oh my
between
God.
Susan Roderick and the Air and Space Museum.
Well, I'm sure it's going to turn out great. Your sister's so talented. I follow her on Instagram. She shoots wonderful stuff, and she's got a lot of energy. I like her vibe.
Yeah, she's interesting for sure.
Well, yeah. So I'm here. I'm here on Big Island actually. And when you came, I think you first started really talking about Aloha last year when you were in Maui for like a month, visiting your uncle, I believe, and it became part of your shows.
It did. Aloha. Like every time you sort of like come into a philosophy of being from the outside and don't really understand it, didn't grow up in it, don't really know what it is, but decide that you're going to, for instance, start doing yoga from your townhouse or whatever, you're only going to get a very incomplete and half-assed sense of what it really is. But I adopted, what is the word I'm looking for? I co-opted Aloha.
You co-opted the thought technology of Aloha.
Yeah, because Aloha is not 100%. Aloha isn't like 100% positive even, or 100% generous, right? There's an aspect of Aloha, at least in modern Hawaii, that has, I don't know, just a tinge of like, look, man, it's going to happen when it happens.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like Hawaiian time is wonderful, but it's also it can be a little bit aggressively casual.
Yes. Well said, actually.
And in trying to navigate, like I was having some anxiety issues at the time, and my life just felt like it was coming unraveled. I was stuck in Hawaii, which is not the worst thing.
That sounds terrible,
as you
John.
know, you can get stuck in Hawaii, right? And not everybody in Hawaii is like living in paradise.
Yeah, definitely. It's an energy vortex. It's hard to have an escape velocity sometimes.
Yeah, right. And but also, you can fight Hawaii, but you're swimming upstream, right? Like Hawaii doesn't care. Hawaii's not going to. You can't fight. I mean, you can try and fight San Francisco and kind of succeed, right? You can fight your way upstream. Every day can be a struggle.
We're gonna make it to the mission.
Yeah, right. But if you do that in Hawaii, Hawaii's just gonna. If you stop moving for a second, the vines are gonna just grow over you, and you'll disappear.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I worked at it the whole time I was there, and I found that Hawaii itself and the ocean and the culture there, and even some aspects of the culture that are like, if you fight it, it can get hostile.
Yeah.
All of that really helped me work out to some degree, like what was important. And I needed to put some stuff that wasn't important by the wayside, because, fighting was not producing good results.
It's like it teaches you to.
Yeah, I called it Aloha. And I mean, just yesterday, my daughter came in and she was crying. She was in a conflict with a little girl across the street. There was an issue about the little girl across the street didn't want to do what my daughter wanted to do. And there wasn't a resolution. They got into a big fight about it. And my daughter has learned to snorkel the last few times we've gone to Maui. And I said, do you remember when you're watching a turtle and the turtle is eating little bits of green off of the rock, and here's the big rock wall, the kind of undersea lava scape. And these turtles are big, some of them are they feel like they're as big as we are. They're certainly as big as she is.
They're pretty intimidating. When you find yourself snorkeling and you're like, oh, there's a 5-foot-long creature just kind of flying next to me.
Yeah.
You don't know what it's going to do.
With a big beak.
Yeah.
I mean, if that beak was on a bird, you would be well to be scared. But I said, remember how when the turtle goes over to eat the rocks and the wave comes in it just moves the turtle, and the turtle moves with the wave. And then when the wave goes out, the turtle moves out with the wave. And she was like, yeah. I said, well, what the turtle is doing is going with the flow.
Mm-hmm.
She was like, right. And I said, the turtle's going with the flow, right? If the turtle decided it really wanted to eat a little patch of lichen, and it was going to fight that wave, and it was going to paddle real hard so it could stay right on that lichen, and then the wave would come in, and then it would have to paddle real hard the other way as the wave went out, just to eat that one little lichen.
Yeah.
But what the turtle does is the wave pushes it in, the wave pushes it out. The turtle never fixates on a single piece of lichen. It just figures it's going to catch it as it goes by. There's always another piece of lichen. I said, that's go with the flow. And that's aloha. And my daughter was just rolling her eyes at me at this point because I was moving up and down the hall like a turtle being moved by the waves, and I was eating lichen off of the wall as I went by.
You were doing an actual demonstration.
I was, and she was like, "Oh, you are so awful." And I was like, "But this is if you're out playing with your friend and your friend doesn't want to play your game, and you insist and you're paddling so hard to make this game happen, just go with the flow. You'll get back to that game. Maybe you'll never get back to it. Who cares? Like, ride the waves in and out." It's like, ugh, I hate you, Dad. But, hopefully if I aloha her over and over, it'll sink in.
John, you just accidentally made a perfect link to the first episode of this season. And I think there's a theme to this show that I didn't realize.
There it is. So you never do until it's just like writing a song. You never know what they're about until you figure out what they're about.
Oh, I got a question about a song too in a minute. But no, I just realized the one of the hidden themes of this show is really balancing out I'm going to sound kind of woo Eastern for a second, but the balancing like the yin and the yang, right? So I don't know if you know who Jamie Catto is, but he co-founded this world band One Giant Leap, and he's excellent. And he was talking about how so often we're trained to go out and make the thing happen, right? Create, form, focus, and he tries to focus on taking a step back and doing the yin, listening and allowing space for things to happen instead of trying to make them happen. And what you're describing is the same thing. So it's just a funny total accident that the same theme popped through in 2 different years, 2 different interviews. It's an underlying theme apparently of that yin coming through.
It's so hard to it's even though I am not a particularly ambitious aggro like type A get things done person, I am ambitious. I do have ambition. I want to do things, accomplish things. And I think I feel that I am more relaxed than I am because I do kind of I am able to go with the flow, but there is a part of me that's really holding on to a plan, not a plan, but like an
ideal.
An ideal, right? There are a lot of ways, I guess, to describe it, but what I'm not doing is truly going with the flow, and I'm not yang as much as I think I am, and I think that is the source of a lot of problems when you imagine that you are yang. I'm using that correctly, right? Not yin.
Yeah. Yang is like they call it like the masculine principle, the making the thing happen, fixing the thing.
Oh, that's yang.
That's yang.
That's yang.
Yeah. And the yin is like listening and allowing and creating space and the spaciousness and the.
So I had that backwards.
Okay.
I meant that backwards. I imagine I'm more yin than I am.
Yeah.
And actually, and I think this happens a lot among men my age in my culture. if you ask us, we're going to say, oh, we're totally yin, man. But there's a lot of yang that's being masked.
Oh God, yeah.
By surface yin.
Hashtag surface yin. Wow. So there's something I got to ask out of the blue for people, because some of the people are just going to listen to this episode because they love you, and that's I mean, we all do that with interview shows. But one of the phrases that you said in Roderick on the Line is, I love it when you do your dad's voice. I gotta say this before I forget. The way you do your dad's voice makes me crack up every time. And for me, the beginning of that was when you were talking about he would tell you to go practice the car.
And was that the first time I ever used his voice?
I kind of doubt it, but it's the first time that I remember it sticking in my head. And that was when were you in Alaska, and he wanted you to practice, and you would take the car and you would take it out into the airport like runway strips, right, and do donuts.
Right.
Am I remembering that right?
Yep.
I'm just curious, how many times did he tell you to go practice the car? I always was curious about that story and how often that would happen. Is that a silly question?
Well, no, not at all. There's that period between age 14 when you, if you're living in a rural place, at age 14, it starts to be somewhat, I don't know, plausible that you could start trying to get your learner's permit.
Yeah.
Like the first time I was ever really taught to drive a car, it was the summer, what was it? The summer before my freshman year in high school, when I was working at the gold mine up at Circle Hot Springs. And the guy that owned the mine, it's basically an uncontrolled airspace up there, right? I mean, it's all gravel. You're a long way off of any kind of highway. It's a closed system, right? It's not like there's a road really that's going anywhere from there.
Right.
And so he had an old, Ford F-250, and he put me in the driver's seat. And the first lesson he gave me, and I have no idea why I guess this is the type of thing I would do. He was like, I'm going to teach you to drive in reverse first. So put it in reverse, and using only your mirrors, I want you to drive around and learn to turn by using your mirrors only. And so, every once in a while, he would take me out in his truck and we would drive around backwards.
That's so smart.
And I would just check the rearview mirrors, right? And so learn to kind of control a vehicle that way. Mm-hmm. And I think he was doing it because he wanted to have one more person working at the mine that he could send to get supplies, right? If he could get me in the truck and say, like, run to town and whatever, get 5 more gold pans. I don't know what he would have sent me on an errand to do, because he never did. I never got to the point where he trusted me to drive the truck. But by the time I was 14, I think my dad had started to teach me to drive, but it was really, I think I was probably 15. Mm-hmm. My birthday's in September.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
I got my learner's permit sometime when I was 15, so it would have been early on. Oh, well, it would have been the winter. My birthday's in September. It would have been the winter prior. So starting in December of that year, of my 15th year, he would have started to throw me the keys and say, because he taught me how to use a clutch or whatever. And then he said, all right, I don't want to have to go drive around with you while you stall the car at every stop sign. So, go practice the car. Now, he didn't mean go down and do donuts at the airport.
Yeah, of course.
He meant go drive around at 5 miles an hour and stop at every stop sign and
go drive around.
Yeah, like practice the car.
There was one rule though, right?
I mean, yeah, I just had to keep it under whatever. I forget what it was. Keep it under 20 miles an hour.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know why that's stuck in my head.
It didn't take me long to know, well, to teach myself how to drive. And then once you do, you want to, push your limits, want to see how
Oh,
see
yeah.
what the car can take.
Oh, yeah. And you're 15, you got a car and there's ice? Do it.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Do it. Yeah. Blow it out.
But my first vehicle that I bought for myself was a Vespa. And I got that a long time before I was 15. Or I'm sorry, a long time before I was 16.
Yeah.
So I must have bought that Vespa. Well, I probably bought it in May of that year. So I'd already been driving the car.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But in Anchorage, I think you could drive a motorcycle. You could get a motorcycle driver's license before a car driver's license.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. And what's it like going back to Anchorage now? Like, what's it like?
When did you arrive at the Big Island? How old were you?
When did I arrive at the Big Island? Well, I don't age, so I look younger than I am, but I think I was 26, 25 or 26 when I first came here, and I've been off and on here for 7 years. So I guess you do the math.
But not so long. I mean, you've seen changes come to the Big Island, I'm sure, in that time. But it would be a lot different if you'd grown up there and were coming back 30 years later or something like that.
God, yes. Oh, God, yes. I can't imagine. I mean, people tell me stories about what Hawaii was like before the internet, and they said this place was like, I mean, I love the culture here. I love the people, but because of the isolation of this place, it was like in the 50s. Like so many of the cultural assumptions and the way people were living was of a different time, because it's my friend calls it the belly button of the world. It's in the most isolated population center. Literally, the most isolated place is Antarctica, but the most isolated population center are these islands. So I can't imagine leaving for 30 years and coming back and being like, whoa, broadband is and they have got the saddle road now. You can drive from Hilo to Kona in an hour and a half. That's crazy. That's sacred. You're not supposed to drive between the mountains. That's sacred land. Nobody cares anymore.
When did they put that highway in? I didn't realize that.
Oh, yeah. I think they finally got it pretty good in 2013, 2014, 2015, around there.
Huh.
Oh, yeah, you save a heck of
a
lot of time.
I've driven that road, and I think I did it probably in 2013 or not that long after. So I didn't realize it was a new thing.
How many lanes was it toward the end?
Oh, it was just a 2-lane road.
It gets, I think parts of it are now, toward the end, parts of it are 4 lanes now. So they've really improved it. And then back in the 90s, it was really not what you wanted to use. But yeah, so it's like, well, good luck. The night marchers are going to get you. Have you heard about the night marchers, John?
No, is that a Hawaii thing?
Oh, yeah. They're Hawaiian ghosts, man. They're like ancient warrior spirits. I talk about them in my book a little bit because we hiked out to this crater. The second night I was ever here, some friends invited me to go, and I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know geography on the Big Island. It's huge. Yeah. And we ended up standing on the edge of a lava lake, and it was incredible. And on the hike back, they're telling me about these Hawaiian ghost night marchers. And the only thing you can do to protect yourself if these Hawaiian ghosts come is you have to take off all your clothes and go in the fetal position, and then they ignore you. As we're walking through this dark,
really,
it's terrifying. But yeah, you got night marchers. You got minihune. Minihune are the small people. Those are different.
Yeah,
there's a lot of stuff here. It's very, very special. As you know, yeah. What was it like the first time? How old were you when you came to? Did you visit Maui first, or did you land in Oahu first? What was that like? We should touch on that.
Well, my dad was in Oahu during World War II.
Oh, right.
He was in the Navy, and he kind of like everybody in the Navy that was fighting in the Pacific went through Oahu many times and stayed at the Royal Hawaiian and all of those things. And he had great memories of it. I think, according to my mom, I think I was either conceived in Hawaii or Mexico. I can't figure out which story is the real story. But my mom and dad went to Hawaii in the 60s on a cruise ship back when that was the main way to get there.
In the before times.
And then my uncle and aunt, they built a house in Kihei in 1970. They and 3 friends bought an acre of land in Kihei across the street from the beach, which at the time, the beach was undeveloped. And they built this compound of 4 little houses behind a lava rock wall.
Lovely.
And it was nice. And so we would go there, throughout my whole childhood. We would go stay at the little Kihei house. But we also went to Honolulu. Mm-hmm. And this was Alaska and Hawaii have always had a special relationship, right? The 49th and 50th states.
Yep. Met a lot of people here coming from Alaska. They like to bounce back and forth. It's interesting.
And weirdly, there are a lot of people from Hawaii that go to Alaska, which seems less less normal, but it is what people do. Yeah, they do it. Yeah. So when I was a kid, plane fare from Anchorage to Honolulu was not that. It wasn't that serious, and I don't think there were direct flights to the Big Island or even to Maui. Mm-hmm. I think everybody flew through Oahu. Mm-hmm. So anyway, we went to Hawaii all the time. I was there every year for all that time. And then I think in high school, we stopped going to Hawaii. I don't think my parents wanted to be with me any more than they had to.
Yeah.
During high school. So I stopped going for a while. But in answer to your first question or your earlier question, Anchorage has changed a lot from when I was young, but weirdly also not. A lot of city, like Seattle, when Seattle changes, what they do is they tear stuff down and build new stuff where the much cooler old stuff used to be. Mm-hmm. Seattle doesn't really need to do that, but Seattle is so concentrated geographically, like it can't really expand. It's a really like constrained little world because it's on an isthmus. In Anchorage, what they did when they expanded was they just kept building stuff further and further out.
Like an urban sprawl situation?
Yeah. And so, and so the center of town, driving around and just looking at Anchorage, it honestly doesn't look that different. And it doesn't feel that different.
Well, that's kind of nice.
It's just like they built a new high school on the south end of town, and they called it South. And so now when you're up there and you talk to people, they're like, oh, he went to South, as though that is significant. Now, when I was growing up, if you had said, oh, he went to West, well, that said it all about that guy. Oh, he went to West. Oh, say no more.
What'd that mean? Is that nice? Is that good?
Well, I mean, as somebody coming from East, let me tell you, somebody that went to West, like, don't leave your wallet lying around. And it's not because West is like a bad, it's not a dangerous place. It's West was the least dangerous of all the schools. I mean, don't leave your wallet lying around because you can't trust those people at West.
Oh, no.
Right.
So there's a big rivalry. Yeah.
Oh, but I have no idea what South is. When they say like, oh, he went to South, I'm like, is that good? Is that bad? What is it? So that's what's changed about Anchorage is just there's more of it. But they haven't torn down any of the old Anchorage.
That's kind of nice. What you're saying reminds me of something that you've talked about a few times, which is, you kind of had a challenging high school and let's say 20s maybe. I recall you saying that your mom was so relieved on your 30th birthday because it sounds like legitimately thought you might not live to your 30th birthday. I was wondering if you could talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, that whole era was probably 18 to 26.
Yeah.
When I left home, I did so, I think that in high school I wasn't actually in much jeopardy. I hadn't started doing drugs. I drank, but I didn't drink like
wasn't too bad yet.
Everybody in Alaska drinks like crazy. The fact that I drank like crazy didn't set me apart.
That's something it has in common with Wisconsin.
Well, in a lot of places, right? I mean,
Yeah.
northern places, people like to drink themselves to sleep.
And this was all before the European walk, right?
Oh, yeah, that happened when I was 30.
That was 30. Okay.
But that's an example of a type of thing where even after I stopped doing drugs, I walked from Amsterdam to Istanbul in a time before cell phones and really when email wasn't even very commonplace.
Yeah.
And so, if you can imagine my mother, I mean, I couldn't imagine it until I had a kid. But imagine taking your kid to the airport and your kid is like, I'm going to walk from Amsterdam to Istanbul. You'll hear from me occasionally. That can't possibly be very fun for your parent. And especially when I was doing drugs and drinking quite a bit, and she wouldn't hear from me for weeks.
Yeah.
All you can do is sit and imagine the worst. And now that I have a kid, and I mean, just the prospect of her being 24 years old and in trouble for whatever reason, like lost her way somewhere. It's just a terrible feeling. I just can't imagine how it would make me feel. So I have a lot of sympathy for my poor mom.
It must have really changed. I guess having your own kid, is that markedly changed? I don't want to say communicate. Just the understanding you have for your mom. Your mom it strikes me, she was on the show one time, strikes me as a very strong woman. And that probably helped her, that kind of inner strength helped her in those times.
I mean, there's a fatalism that I don't know if fatalism maybe isn't the right word, but my mom does not spend any time or emotional energy wishing things were different.
Right.
She's entirely sort of action based, and if you want things to be different, she said, she'll figure out ways to make things different, but she doesn't wish the past was different, and she doesn't wish things now were different. She just does what she can.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was sick, or when I was drunk or lost or whatever, she just did what she could. She coped, and I think it was very stressful.
Yeah,
but I don't think it was. I don't think she had any remorse. And so, if I had, if she'd gotten a message that I was dead, because the thing is, if she'd gotten a message that I was injured, she would have something to do. She'd get on an airplane and she'd go find me and rescue me. And, like she wouldn't,
right.
If I was hurt or arrested or something, I think that would have been great for her. She would have had a mission.
Right.
The only thing she couldn't do anything about was if I was dead. And then she would have to fly to Romania and collect the body. And that's where she would get into that mode, like, well, I have to go do these things. But, that would be the heartbreak. I'm different, right? I mean, I'll sit and lament. And so
you're pretty self-reflective.
For good and ill. But I think
that's something we have in common.
Is that right? Are you pretty self-reflective?
Oh my God. Yeah. I think that's one of the reasons why I enjoy your work and the shows. And just like sometimes stuff comes out of your mouth where it's like, I was thinking the exact same thing. So it makes me, I don't know if you do the Myers-Briggs test inventory, but I wouldn't be surprised if we had the same type. I don't know.
I'm sure I did it once or 600 times. People are always doing it for me.
I bet.
But I can never remember. What is your job, by the way, Andrew?
Oh, what is Andrew's job? Andrew owns his own. I don't know why I'm third personing. I own my own business, so I am an author and a computer consultant. So I I've written 6 books. I write tropical sci-fi. I actually got to call into Back to Work, the One Call-In Show, episode 100, and mention it was right before my first book came out back in like 2012. So all 6 of my books are inspired by Hawaii. 3 of them are sci-fi, tropical sci-fi with mystery elements, and 3 of them are true. They're technically a memoir, and I call it an action memoir because it could be basically be an action movie, and it's the story of what happened when I moved from Wisconsin to Lower Puna on Big Island, and all these incredible things that happened to me. So, so that's like getting those out was one of my biggest projects for the last 10 years, and the reviews have been really good. I get email from people I don't even know, and I was selling them around the island before. I don't want to get bogged down with pandemic talk, but it's definitely affected my income. But there are various things that I do. But my main focus is I'm an independent author. Yeah, it's really rewarding.
So you were selling them. How were you going about selling them?
I was selling them in bookstores here, and back when we had bookstores, and I was selling them in markets in person. A lot of tourists, but also locals. And let me tell you, and I do hope, I do hope that you get to release a book someday, because I would love reading your book. It's such an amazing feeling, though, John, to be able to sign, and the Hawaii one's called 10,000 Hours in Paradise. It's amazing, especially that one, to sign that book for people whose adventure here is just starting. It's like coming full circle, because you put years into these things, and to be able to like hand it to somebody and they give you cash American money is like, wow, I'm making an impact. And then you go on Amazon and that person leaves a review on Amazon, and there's a pretty good gig until until a virus.
Have you been embraced by the great state of Hawaii as a local author?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. The local authors here are wonderful. It's funny because most of the ones that I've met are all mystery writers. There's a lot of crime and mystery writers here. I feel like I'm the only, which is great. You know, nothing like hiding a body in a volcanic hole. I call it a puka. You know, and you know, occasionally there are missing people here. People get really freaked out. It's pretty rare, but yeah, no. And they're almost universally ladies, and they're basically all my aunties. They're super sweet. I'm actually really lucky in that respect. But yeah, you know, I love what I do, and then I do some design work on the side as well. But most of my income was the book sales, which is incredible. I feel super lucky.
That's phenomenal. That's great.
Yeah, it's one of these things. I mean, I imagine it must feel similar to how, like, you didn't think that you'd be podcasting full time 10 years ago. Well, they didn't really exist 10 years ago, but like, maybe you could talk about that for a hot minute of like, you sort of leaned into podcasting. It wasn't like you intended to do it in the onset, but then I think it started with you as a guest host on Back to Work. Am I remembering that right? Like 1,000 years ago?
Not sure. I mean, I think in the very early days, I didn't know obviously I didn't know what a podcast was, but I was coming from a time when I did all kinds of media, right? I would do interviews a lot through the rock years.
Maybe King Neptune.
So, well, that was many years later, 10 years later.
I know.
But I was used to doing interviews, and so whatever that when Merlin said, "Will you cover for me with Dan?" I was like, "Yeah, sure. I'll talk to somebody on the phone. That's not hard." And I think I'd been doing it with Merlin for a while, and he'd been publishing them as podcasts before I was fully aware of what I was doing, what we were doing.
Oh, that's right. Had you been doing Roderick before you were on? Because you were also on the Merlin show, which was a kind of short-lived but good video show that he did. That might have been your first.
I think all that stuff at first, I just thought I was helping Merlin. he had that show and he was like, be on my show. And it was like, sure. Like I don't mean helping Merlin like that Merlin needed my help. I just mean that when he asked me to do something, I said yes, because he had given me so much help.
Yeah. He was sitting down there, building your website 1,000 years ago. It's a good story.
Yeah. So whatever, or just, we were friends. So when he said, hey, why don't I record our calls and put them out? I was like, yeah, whatever you want. It wasn't until we were a couple of dozen episodes in that I realized that it was a show, that we were doing a show, and that was something that was also fun for me, or that also was a thing that I had some ownership of,
right.
To whatever small degree I do, but no, I could never. I mean, Andrew, I never had a plan of any kind how I was going to make a living.
Yeah.
And only now barely do.
Wow.
I mean, I'm only now conscious that I need to make a living.
That's amazing to me, John. Like, okay. It's hard to know the self fully, right? But what do you feel? There's that 80-20 rule, right? Which tends to be true. 20% of your effort ends up being 80% of your results, right? Converting to 80% of your results. What do you feel like you did right to have a business, do this, I don't know exactly, you're probably being like 1099 or something, that is completely remote. You can just do that. You can do your 4 shows on Maui if you decide to go to Maui for a month. Like, what was it? It can't just be dumb luck. Like, there was something that you did right, one would think.
How
do you think it's building off of the fact that you had a pretty great band and have it really? I'm still holding out for the next Long Winters album. You think it's building from that, or what do you think kind of led to what like habits or mindset do you think has helped you? I suppose.
I think the advantage of not having a plan is to circle back to Aloha, or to circle back to Yin.
Mm-hmm.
When a fork comes in the road, I didn't have a plan, so I didn't really force the issue one way or the other. And a lot of the decisions that I've made since I was 21 were made because I came to sometimes really small fork in the road, and just, I mean, it's not a case of going in the path of least resistance. It's the case of kind of following your attraction and your aptitude much more freely, just because you're not, my decisions weren't pre-made based on my assumption about what my future was going to be. So for instance, I came up with a handful of bands that were fronted by songwriters that were amazingly talented and differently talented than me. Some of them way better singers than me. Some of them, really crafty songwriters. Some of them just really good musicians. But a lot of times they had a vision of what they wanted, what they thought success for their band was going to be. And it invariably involved signing a major label deal, getting tour support money from the label that would enable them to have a bus or a van, and then they could quit their job, and then they could, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then they could make the record.
And that wasn't your goal?
And because they had the thing is that all of those were preconditions. And I didn't have I didn't have a goal. And so when somebody came along and said, well, this tour, we can only pay you $100 a night. And, it's going to cost you $150 a day to keep the band on tour. I borrowed a car. I put the guys in the truck. We all slept in the van, or we slept on people's floors. Like, I didn't have an expectation that I was ever going to have a deal where people were paying for me. Like, I was never going to have a major label deal. I hoped, but I never thought I would, I never expected to.
Hmm.
And that was true all the way along the line. Like I'm sure there were a lot of people that in 2011, somebody said, hey, let's start a podcast. And their first thought was, well, what does it pay? Or, like I can't do it because I don't have the time or whatever. And I mean, Merlin and I did that show for 3 years without ever making a penny from it.
Yep.
And so to do that required that I not have a plan. Because if I'd had a plan, if you came to me now and said, start a podcast with me, I would say, yeah, I can't afford to unless it is something that I can see is going to earn me some money because my time is valuable.
Yeah. And you already have 4 shows and a daughter.
But I was 40 years old when Merlin asked me to do that show. And apparently at that time, I didn't think my time was too valuable to do it. And partly that is that I considered my friendship with Merlin to be important.
Definitely.
And partly it was that it just sounded fun, but partly it was that I couldn't possibly have had a strategy.
Yeah, you couldn't predict.
You couldn't have, right? If your strategy was, I want to have a successful podcast that becomes my career, I would have done 1,000 different things than what I did. So if I had been Yang about it, I wouldn't be here today.
Oh man, I gotta rename this damn show. It's gonna be the Yin Show.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a totally different mindset. I mean, but the touring takes a lot of energy.
Well, everything does. I mean, even talking to somebody once a week takes a lot of energy.
Yeah.
Because it's the thing I think that a lot of people don't understand about performance is that you
gotta get your mind right.
Yeah, you've been
a little bit.
Well, and you've been rehearsing your whole life, right? You've been training your whole life to be able to sit and talk to somebody comfortably and not get anxiety, not get social anxiety, not ever get tongue tied or feel dumbfounded.
Are you prone to social anxiety?
Not anxiety, but because I've trained myself out of it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, when you're young, I mean, there were plenty of times when I sat in a chair just covered in flop sweat because I didn't know what to say and I didn't know how to be there.
Right.
I was thinking back to a radio show. I got asked to be on some kind of panel show years ago with it was a show hosted by John Moe, who went on to work in Minnesota Public Radio. And the other panelist was Luke Burbank, who started the show Too Beautiful to Live. And it was like let's talk about the news of the day here on public radio in Seattle. And they threw a question to me and I didn't know how to answer. And this is live radio. I sat there just like,
What had happened was
and Luke Burbank was sitting next to me, putting his hand on my shoulder like, it's cool, you've got this. And I was like, I came up, and then they realized like they needed to cut to commercial or go, and I was so embarrassed. But it was the first time I'd ever been on radio, many years ago.
You were literally in the hot seat. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I wasn't immune to it. Because those are alien. It's alien to sit at a microphone with a set of headphones on and try and be fun and funny.
You think so?
And so don't you think it's a little? Don't you think it's a little strange?
Okay. But so you didn't grow up like recording yourself on cassette tapes? Because I did, and I thought it was endlessly entertaining. You go to your friend's house with a cassette tape. I mean, it's a little bit different than having like a big microphone in front of you and headphones, but I don't know. I mean, I'm obviously wired weirdly, but I mean, it's maybe doing it a lot.
I don't like to hear the sound of my own voice at all.
Really?
No, I don't.
What about your songs?
I don't like to listen to my stuff. No, I don't like to. I mean, I listen to my songs 8,000 times when I'm recording them, and then I don't want to ever listen to my own album.
Yeah, I get that.
So I don't like.
We have a good
I
voice.
think that,
for what it's worth.
well, that's nice. Thank you.
I think it's true.
I was talking to, I think, Dan about it the other day, and the process of having your written voice, your speaking voice, your inner voice, and your storytelling voice all be the same voice.
Oh, right.
Has been a long process for me. There are a lot of people that when they start to tell a story, you see them switch modes and they no longer are themselves. They switch over into some sort of like, now I'm telling a story. And there are people whose, I mean, you can just tell that that the voice they use in the world is not the same as their inner voice.
Their invisible self.
For me, like bringing all those, to bring all those together so that they're not separate. What it did was it relieved me. You know the way they say like the hardest part of of being a liar is that you have to remember all your lies.
Yeah.
If your inner voice and your outer voice aren't the same voice, you basically have to remember your lies all the time. Because your inner voice is yourself, and then if your outer voice is different, then it's a lie. You're lying all the time. You're lying,
even if it's just in tone.
Yeah, just in tone.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, it's subtle.
So
but
that's why you get people that are they're always uncomfortable because they're just like hoping that nobody finds out that this isn't their real voice.
Oh, and then you got imposter syndrome and all the things.
So for me, like linking all those things up was just a process of realizing that my inner voice was fine. And I could just use that. I could use that as my outer voice. I could use it as my writing voice. I could use it as my singing voice, even.
I was listening to Ultimatum this morning. I just said, Siri. Oh, I shouldn't say that on the show.
Yeah, be careful.
Shuffle. Hey, Dingus. Shuffle Long Winters. And Ultimatum came up, and I was like, oh, I haven't heard this in a few months. Love that song. You feel like it's a journey of self-acceptance? Would you characterize it like that? Of just being deeply okay with, this is John. John is lovable. And
no, I wouldn't go that far.
Oh, okay. All right.
I would say self-acceptance in terms of like, this is who I am and this is what you get.
And this is okay.
I don't even know if I'd go that far, but this is who I am and this is what you get I'm
giving you a hug, buddy.
Is as much self-acceptance.
Yeah.
I feel like there's the woo aspect of our contemporary society goes that extra step of like, and it's okay and you're okay. And you're good and you're lovable and you deserve a hug. And it's like, I don't believe really any of that, but I do believe that that to get to a point where you're like, this is who I am. And this is
take it or leave it.
Like I was dating a girl at one point years and years ago, and she was an outlier for me, not somebody I normally would have dated. It was a weird transitional moment in my life. She was a girl that had, a lot of cool kid tattoos, and she had she was very cool. She was very, she was brash, and she was,
she sounds cool.
In a way, she was much more flamboyantly alternative culture than I was. And she was very fit. And she came from a culture of people where being very fit was part of their culture. And early on, we were undressed with one another, and it was, maybe the second or third time it had happened.
Yeah.
And we were in a hotel. It was the middle of the day. And so, it wasn't like under the covers or in the dark. I was just kind of there in my natural garment.
And you're all togethers.
And, and there was a look on her face. And she was she was a very unedited person. And I said, is there, what is this look that's crossing your face? How am I meant to interpret it? And she said, just, again, very unedited. She was like, I don't know. I'm just used to being with guys who are really fit and you're like not really fit. And it was a moment that, you know, it was a very vulnerable place for me already, because not being fit is a place that I've always reprimanded myself for it.
Yeah.
And I had, you know, in a kind of flash of a kind of confidence, and it was a confidence born of necessity, right? Because a comment like that would devastate me, and in a state of being devastated, like I'm done, right? I'm cooked.
Yeah. Devastate a lot of people.
If she and I are going to continue a relationship under those conditions, then like I'm under her thumb from then on, right?
Yeah,
I mean, all she has to do is look at me out of the side of her eye, and I'm devastated. And I don't want to crawl around. I'm not on anybody's leash.
Hell no.
And so I said, well, look, here's the deal. This is me.
Yep.
Like there's not some platonic ideal of me that you're dating, and that this one in front of you is like one that needs to like achieve the platonic ideal of itself. Like this is it. And so it's really your choice. Like, is this what you want? Am I the one you want to date, or do you want to date someone else? And if you want to date me, then I am this. And so that's all 100% on you, whether or not you can handle it or not. And watching the look on her face change as she just about faced it and was like, no, it's you. I want to date you. And I was like, well, then this is it. Can you hang? And she was like, totally. I can hang. That's not what I was saying. And I was like, all right, well then that conversation is in our past, because I'm not, you know, there's no fit me that's going to come around the corner. And that little bit of, and I don't know whether it was like, it's the confidence that comes when the chips are down, you know, when somebody's got a gun pointed at you, really.
I feel like you'd be good in that situation.
But walking away from it, I did not feel like this is me and I deserve a hug, or this is me and I'm worthy of your love, there was nothing sweet about it. It was, look, I recognize I'm fucked up, but I am it. Yeah. And I'm not going to walk around being sorry.
Yeah.
I don't deserve anything, but I'm sure as shit not going to be sorry.
Well, you established really clarity and clear boundaries in that interaction. That was like exactly.
I don't know if there were any boundaries in our relationship.
Well, I mean, she could have been like, that could have been a gateway for her to be like, well, it'd be great if you changed. And you put a bit of I don't know, that felt like a kind of boundary for you going, hey, this is me, leave me or take me. Is maybe a kind of
the boundary. The boundary is always. I just had this conversation with somebody the other day. With as far as love goes and romance, it is always easier for me to be alone.
Wow.
So the threat of being unloved, or the threat of that someone can levy, where they're like, well, if you don't change, then I might withhold my love. Like I'm 2 steps ahead of you there. Like I'm fine being alone, right? So I'm not going to put up with any of that kind of shit.
And that gives you power. I mean, over your own life, yeah.
Yeah, it's free, a kind of freedom.
Yeah.
And there have been plenty of times in my life where where a desire to be loved by someone was stronger than my desire to be alone.
Yeah.
And those have been nightmares. I've hated those times in my life.
Yeah.
And it's not like being alone is like, it doesn't satisfy my desire to be loved.
Yeah.
But I would rather be alone than be either despised or on a leash.
Right.
And I guess that's liberty, but it's nothing to do with feeling like I deserve better. Oh, that's the thing. When I hear people say like, you deserve better, it's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. You don't deserve better. You get what you get and don't be upset.
Give it, get, and don't be upset.
And if you don't like it, then change it, but don't, like the culture that says like that we deserve anything is the one that I can't. At least I don't have any part of me that feels like I deserve better. Except I do feel like I deserve more faves on my tweets.
Yeah, I fave your tweets sometimes.
You're great at faving my tweets. Thank you.
Oh, did you see that? Do you see that? You're welcome. You have good tweets. And then you had that one lately. Oh, my God. Mark Hamill.
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh, my God.
I got the one tweet, and now it's the biggest tweet I ever had, and it makes me super mad. But
why does it make you mad? You feel like the other thing got more popular?
It makes me mad because it's my daughter's tweet. My daughter tweeted, said something, and she got 220,000 likes, and I work my ass off over there on Twitter, and I don't get shit. But
yeah. Well, this is social media. You can't predict anything. I'm thinking about. This is just totally random, kind of. There was a line I had stuck in my head when I got up this morning, but now, and it was "crave" translates into "slave," which is one of the lines from your song. The conversation reminds me of this too. Of like, if you're craving that person's acceptance. If you're willing to change for someone else, you're already losing, I think, in degrees, right? You weren't going to suddenly start going to the gym so she would be totally happy, because then do you feel like it's a slippery slope? And also, is there kind of like a Buddhist inspiration to that line, or was it just like life experience?
Well, you're absolutely right that's what I meant by it. But where it starts is in drug addiction or food addiction or sex addiction.
Right.
Like as soon as you go across the line to crave, then you're totally a slave, whether it's heroin or whether it's whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. And approval is a big one.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so using that, because in a lot of my songs, it starts with addiction. And then that becomes a metaphor for love. Because I think I had, I was developing addictions and love at the same time. And neither one of them I didn't really develop a healthy relationship to either thing. I wasn't particularly well grounded in love or drugs when I met those two things in the wild. You
feel like you equated them in some way?
Well, they were the only two directions it seemed like a person could go. I mean, I've always sought out,
like, toward happiness.
Well, yeah. I mean, or toward
I guess I see
toward
that.
Like experience that you could really feel.
Yeah.
Like for me, I was never somebody that somebody gave them an assignment. I completed the assignment and handed it in, and the grade that I received was sufficient. The grade was never sufficient. Like, oh, I got an A, big fucking deal. Like that's it. That was our exchange. You gave me this assignment I didn't care about. I completed it to your satisfaction, and you gave me a letter. Why are we doing this? Why? What is this all like? Why am I participating in this?
Even an A didn't satisfy you.
No, because what's the difference? I mean, an A, a B, a C. All it is like a quick round of applause that immediately goes away. There's no.
Yeah.
It's all of that is what have you done for me lately culture, right? There's no.
God, I wish I had a bell sometimes. I got to get a bell.
And there's no thrill, right? You don't feel it. There's no passion. And getting drunk and high and falling in love both felt dangerous and passionate, unpredictable, scary, but potentially gateways to experiences that I couldn't have, that I didn't have to think up myself. Right? If you fall in love with somebody, you don't have to think up the thing that's going to push you to the edge. It's there. It's getting made up for you.
It's already edgy
by the animal in you is making it up. Whew. And the same is true with drugs and alcohol. You don't have to make up a problem. You don't have to make up an adventure. Like, one will happen.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I do equate them, and they felt and still feel equally perilous. It's just now that I don't do drugs and alcohol, it's love that imperils me more. And that's not what I set out to.
I can relate to that. And I'm curious how long you've been sober. You don't have to tell me, but
25 years.
Woo! I have a couple alcoholics in my family, and it's dealing with that personally has really given me a lot of empathy for that as a condition. And if someone really close to me is alcoholic, and it's like every day I think, just if you can just stay on the wagon, don't fall off the wagon, because they just lose. Some people can drink and some people can't. They just can't. It's just a slippery slope, and it almost feels like, maybe that's the nature of craving. It's always a slippery slope if you don't have the perspective on your limitations. Then you give all your power away. I mean, were you? One thing I want to touch on before you go is like, is there like a spiritual tradition you were raised in or anything like that? Was there like because it seems like, and maybe it's because I'm a non-sitting, non-practicing Buddhist, kind of. There's definitely a lot in Buddhism that I relate to. Do you identify with anything now? I'm always curious to see how people's, spiritual and esoteric views impact their art, especially for artists, because it's a big impact, I think.
Both of my parents were free thinkers that had been raised in a tradition. My mom was a Methodist, and my dad was effectively, I think my dad's father was a Presbyterian minister, but I think by the time my dad got to be an adult, I think he would have been part of an Episcopal culture, at least. So they both were, but they were raised, in the early part of the 20th century. So, or the first half of it, at least. So religion just played a much larger cultural role in the,
definitely
middle class, right? Mm-hmm. But by the time I came around, neither one of them was religious so much as they were that first generation of people that had transitioned to spiritual rather than religious. So they got to kind of call their own shots.
Right.
My dad had a lot of different religion. My mom had a lot of different religion. They just kind of put it all together and took what they liked and it worked for them, and it worked for my sister that same way. She is variously Buddhist and practices, a whole goulash of religions.
Yeah, goulashism.
But I'm not. I don't have things that I think are sacred. I don't have sacrament. I don't have ritual in my life, really, especially. I don't do the same thing every day or every Sunday. I don't take comfort in things being constant. Mm-hmm. I don't look outside for something to be my pole star. Mm-hmm. And so all of my reflection is bounced off of what I perceive to be the known universe and the laws that I have managed to discern, and other people and what they appear to be constituents of. It's like systems. I'm looking at systems and like, am I in this system? Am I not? Are we all? Is there a way to ever be out of it? And all of that is just part of it's just fascinating. It's a thing to let your imagination roam toward.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think your self-reflection is evident in the shows.
Yeah, but it's not related to, is there a space wisdom?
John, what happens when we die? Yeah, it's like,
that's the thing. Is there a space wisdom? I mean, is there space? Is there? Yeah, space math. There's space math for sure.
Show title. Yeah.
But is there space wisdom?
Do you have a yeah? Do you have a sense of it though? I mean, like, because you've had a lot of interesting experiences. I'm sure you've done mushrooms and been far out, and have you gotten any wisdom from? Not wisdom. Have you gotten any like what you feel is beyond information from that?
Oh, I chase God all the time.
Yeah.
But we're such malleable little monkeys. How can you say, like, my perception, your perception? Yeah. They're such flawed little like scripts that are running. Who cares, right? Who cares what my little mind says? And it's back to what Mike Squire said. Like, feelings are real. It's like, okay, feelings are real. Yeah. And so feelings are real. I mean, that's I guess as far as it goes. I mean, I got sober because I stood out in the forest and said, "God, please relieve me of my suffering," and God did.
Whoa.
But what is that? I mean, what that is feelings are real more than it is that that I am gonna like tithe to the first church that I walked into after that happened.
Well, yeah, there's well, it's like you're saying, there's spiritual sides and there's religious sides. Those are different, Like, is there a great spirit? I think so. Is religion really complicated and maybe been distorted from what's really going on? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I don't really think there's a great spirit. I do think that there's there's such a vastness that we could never know.
Yeah, there's a force.
That it's force is just midichlorians.
Yeah, you get
whatever.
Yeah,
like the story keeps changing, right? Even of the force.
I don't watch that movie. Episode 1 is verboten.
So anyway, math, I guess, like space math. I wish I understood it better.
So do you have like I guess my closing thing would be, and this is all kind of, I mean, it sounds like, I was going to ask you what your biggest lesson you've learned during your career has been, but I think you've kind of pretty much danced all around it, which is, that self-acceptance is a great place to start. I don't know if that's the biggest one, but that seems like a big theme.
Yeah, self-acceptance to the exclusion of feeling like that means you deserve anything. And that's the hardest part for me, is not that I've never felt like I deserve anything because I'm inherently virtuous or because I'm good. I do have the expectation that just comes from things always having been a certain way, that I think you could sometimes describe as entitlement, but more often is just a case of, if you grow up and your water is always clean, you don't even know to think that that stipulating that your water be clean is a thing you have to do.
It's an assumption.
And the day that you first get you get a glass of dirty water, it's not a flaw in you that you're surprised by it. It's just, you just never, every morning you woke up and no one ever chopped off your finger. So the first time someone chops off your finger, of course you're surprised. And it's not that you aren't, that's not a moral failing on your part. And so there is a lot of that in my life, just because I was raised where I was and how I was and by who I was.
Yep.
That I do expect when I walk into a room that I'm going to be greeted. Mm-hmm. And so it isn't really even that I feel like there's anything special about me. It's just that I'm used to being greeted when I walk into a room.
Right.
And learning that is that isn't true for everyone has been a learning experience for me. But it wasn't that I had to learn. It wasn't that I thought I was entitled to anything. It's just it's the
habits.
It's the subtler form of entitlement, which is just like, well, what do you mean? What do you mean? There's no seconds. Like, there's always seconds. What do you mean there's no seconds? Like, yeah, sorry, there's no seconds. You're in a restaurant, kid.
Yeah. The first rule is make it all. something I learned from you. You get a bag, you make
That's
it
right.
all.
Make all the spaghetti.
Is there anything you'd like to point people toward before we let you go?
No, I think you've done a wonderful job of explaining who I am to everybody. So thanks for having me on your show, sir.
Oh, of course. I really appreciate it, John. And I'd love to talk for like 2 minutes in an after show if you have 2 minutes. But everybody should go to thelongwinters.com and follow John Roderick on Twitter. And he's John Roderick on Instagram. And his Instagram is a delightful smorgasbord, I'll call it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
good.
It's very fun. It's very, very fun. Thanks, John. And
okay, thanks again.
Mahalo.
Mahalo.
You know, interviews like that are one of the reasons why I love podcasting. Seriously. Now, before I leave you, I want to say a big thank you, first of all, to John for sharing some of his afternoon with me. It was a real honor. Also, if you've enjoyed this interview, there are a lot more. And iTunes is the easiest way to find them. All you have to do is search for Aravinda Show. That's ARAVINDA SHOW. And if you're on Instagram or Twitter, I'm at Hello Crusoe on there. And that's hello, CRUSOE. And I post samples of interviews when they come out. So it's the best way to see when they're coming out. Also, you should just subscribe on iTunes anyway. And be sure to check out John Roderick on Instagram as well. He's hilarious on there. And you should check out his new Western State Hurricane record. It's been remastered. It sounds amazing. It's streaming on Bandcamp for free. I'll put all those links, of course, in the show notes for this episode over at Mythly, my website. That's MYTH.LI, as in leopard, unicorn. That's easy to find, actually. And click Aravinda Show in the menus. You'll be able to find the show notes for this episode and all the great shows, as well as samples of my books, including 10,000 Hours in Paradise that we talked about in this interview. It's a story of what happened when I moved from Wisconsin to Lower Puna on the Big Island of Hawaii. Talk about culture shock. And it's a story so true that I had to give everyone pseudonyms. It's so full of magic that you won't be able to put it down. And you can get about the first 20% for free by going to Mythly, my website, and click on Get 3 Free Books, and it's in the menus. It's easy to find. And also, and this is very important, if you enjoyed this interview and you want to support the show, the best thing you can do is leave a review on iTunes. I know you hear this in the other shows you listen to, but it's so true, man. Or woman. It helps iTunes rank the show higher. It helps the iTunes get the tunes to more eyes, if you know what I mean. And even one sentence review just helps more than I can say. I'm in a goofy mood, but I'm leaving it in. What's in the show is in the show. I'm Andrew Crusoe. Thank you so much for listening. Aloha.